All right, Catalyst family, welcome. Welcome with me, Vaughn Smith. Vaughn is a guy I met about a month ago in just outside of Detroit at a gym called CrossFit Justice. And Vaughn was one of the coaches that was welcoming me into the gym and was willing to share his information with me about this heart rate stuff that I've been trying to implement into the gym. And you guys have done a really good job with this week. So I invited Vaughn on to talk about his story because it has been told before in a couple of podcasts. And he's a bit of a local celebrity down in the Detroit, Ann Arbor area. So he may retell some of that story, but I wanted to ask some of your questions and certainly get his viewpoint on it because it's really valuable and he's done it really, really well for the last couple of years. So welcome, Vaughn. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Oh, I appreciate it, Mike and Catalyst family. I appreciate you having me by for a chat.
Amazing. We'll have to have you up sometime.
Oh, I love that.
Now, I'll rehash, maybe I'll get you to tell your story a little bit, but you were a competitive CrossFit athlete for some time, dating back, I think, to 2012. You would go to competitions and more or less expect to sniff the podium, right? You were a competitive guy. One of the things I loved in one of your podcasts that you did was you said that there's kind of this thing with CrossFit and golf where if you get really good at golf or CrossFit, you get to do more golf or CrossFit. There's kind of just this, it's not a diminishing return, but it's not an escalating return either. It's just like, we get to do more things. So you had an epiphany at some point around 2018 where you decided, I'm a really good athlete, but I don't like the way I feel. Can you tell us how that whole realization that what you were doing wasn't where you wanted to be a few years down the road?
Yeah. Boy, all of us have been there before, right? When you have that really good workout, you feel really good, you're all excited. And so you decide you want to dip your toe into the deeper waters. And in CrossFit's case, right? Okay, if a little bit of training is good, that means more training must be even better. So you start watching all the Rich Froning's doing 8 workouts a day and this guy doing this many workouts a day. So you're going to add more and more and more. And sure enough, I would do more and more and more. And which was great. Once I'd come in and do that first air squat and take 5 shots of C4 and finally start moving, then it wouldn't be so bad. And then sure enough, you'd have to amp yourself up to do Diane and then follow that right up with a heavy lifting session and maybe come back in the afternoon and do something else. But all the time outside of the gym, I was a wreck. I was
an absolute
you've got a job, right? Oh yeah. I mean, I can, I'd get up in the morning and you wonder if you're injured or if that pain in your shoulder is going to go away in a half hour, and you have a hard time, getting out the door, and at work, you're kind of in this fog a little bit. And you think about all the things that are important to us. I mean, CrossFit is really, really fun, but it's all about our relationships and our other responsibilities, right? And I'm a husband to a woman that is way out of my league, and I've got 2 really awesome kids that I love that are into athletics. And again, their favorite thing to do with me would be to play football in the backyard. And there were times where I just felt broken, and I'd come home and I'd be like, just exhausted, almost too exhausted to play with my own kids. Yet I would just try to amp up in the gym, but I was just breaking myself worse and worse and worse. And to the point where, I'm not sure if I told you this, I went to the doctor because I thought I had sleep apnea. I wasn't sleeping, right? And they, here I am, a chiseled 185-pound guy with abs, and they're like, this is not the normal sleep apnea person we see. And sure enough, we did the whole sleep test and that wasn't it. And I couldn't figure out what the problem was, but it's almost the more work I did, the less returns I was getting. And at the time, it didn't occur to me that I was simply truly overtraining. All that extra stress couldn't possibly be absorbed. So luckily I had a mentor and a guy named Max Finkbeiner, who is a regional level athlete, Masters Wadapalooza guy, like a very good athlete I'd known for a long time. In fact, the guy who got me into all this in the first place. And he said, my advice, I called him like, what's my next thing? Am I having to do some kind of like Bulgarian split cycle? Like, what are we, what's our next big hack? And he's the one who told me that really, after I shared with him everything I was doing, said, you need to slow down.
Yeah.
Which at first I'm like, all right, great talk. I'll see you there. Like this, like that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Right. And it took me several weeks later to kind of start thinking on it. And I started calling Max, and he introduced me to this whole idea that you can slow down to a point where you can absorb the training you're doing. And although like we would love to emulate all this 5-a-days and everything else, which I wasn't doing 5-a-days, by the way, 2-a-days were more than enough for an old guy like me. But the intensity I would bring, and just, I thought you had to end every workout laying on your back, panting, you know, that taste of metal in your mouth because you went so hard kind of thing. And I thought that intensity was the answer. And it turns out almost the opposite. A great analogy, if I can share one with you after thinking about this for a while, was it's like I really wanted a good suntan. Like I really wanted to be tan. And I thought the way you got tan was to sit outside as long as you could stand, right? And then maybe you heal up overnight a little bit, but of course you get totally burned. And then you want to try to come back the next day and your body is in no way or shape ready to take on more stimulus from the sun. But this is what we do. Get over it, Pansy. Get out there and do it again and do it again. And and eventually, you're right, you can get pretty tan doing that, right? But you're going to, if you survive melanoma and 5 other things, you might be able to get there. But a lot of you're going to be broken and just miserable along the way. So the thing that was really interesting in what Max was telling me about is imagine a way that we could really measure how much tan you're getting and stop you just the point where you're getting enough stimulus to make a change, but not so much that you're going to get burned. And what that means, you'll actually be able to heal overnight and you'll just be a little more tan than you were the next day. And now we can add a little more stimulus. Imagine going about it that way. And that analogy, please don't poke too many holes in it, because I'm sure there's lots of them, but it is an interesting way to think about how we train and how we've traditionally looked at the athletes we put on a high horse as far as your games athlete and the videos they post and everything they do. That's what it looks like they're doing. They are roasting themselves. But we discovered there's a better way.
I've always said to our clients that the reason you don't see these elite CrossFitters doing the things that we're going to be talking about today is because it doesn't look good on Instagram, right? No one wants to look at Matt Fraser riding a C2 bike for 2 hours at zone 2 because it's not sexy, right? But
100%
falling down on the ground and doing those, you know, these crazy workouts back to back is. So you talked to Max, and I really was I was curious as I was driving home a couple of weeks ago. So I'd watched your podcast that you sent me. You know, we had talked at the staff meeting, and I really wondered what was the tipping point, right? You had this coach, you're a good athlete, you know, like you said, ripped, you're competitive. And you have this coach who you're probably thinking about firing because he's telling you to take your foot off the gas pedal. What was the thing that clicked with you? I know you went for some testing. Was that the thing that made the process happen? Or was it just kind of like you realized that everything else in your life was being affected by it and you just needed a change?
Yeah, it was a good mix of both. I didn't go down to test right away, but Max, again, he was still competing and still having great results. He was telling me, for the last 3 months, I have not gone hard at all. Like my intensity went way back. And he goes, I'm actually hitting PRs for the first time in a long time. And I found that intriguing. So I had a pretty competitive gym full of my guys and girls and my squad. And I have a wonderful group of people. It sounds like you have a tremendous group of people as well. And, you know, we all pride each other on sucking it up and going as hard as you can. And we loved laying on our backs and trying to stumble around and high five. That stuff was great. So to take a break from that was huge. And if I didn't have this long relationship with Max or be able to see how successful he was, this would have been tough. But sure enough, I set up 65 pounds on a barbell and had a box, and I had my heart rate monitor, and I did a half-hour long workout of 65-pound deadlifts and box step ups. Now, this is from a guy that is, this is from a guy that's used to pulling, you know, in the mid 300s, and box jumps were kind of my jam. I'd quick hop everything and whatever. And I'm going rep. And meanwhile, and this was trying to keep my heart rate down, which of course, at that time, I'd look at a barbell and my heart rate would go through the roof. I had to reteach myself just to slow down. And I'm doing this thing, and my buddies are looking at this guy in the corner all of a sudden, from going, all gas, no brakes to seemingly all brakes, no gas. And they were confused.
Yeah.
And it was a really interesting change. But to follow your question that says, well, what made you want to keep going down that road? After 2 or 3 days, I wasn't sure if I was getting fitter or not, but I felt amazing. Like I had so much energy. I wasn't falling asleep on the couch at 8:45 at night. Every little problem that happened with my kids who are still young at age, I think you've been in that situation. When you have energy, you can be calm, you can have it with grace, you can be thoughtful, you're not reactive, you're responding, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that was happening with my marriage and my kids. All of a sudden, I was, this different guy that had all the energy and time to give in the world versus the guy that was snapping, that felt terrible and everything else. So, it brought up a lot of questions as the weeks went by, and there I am in the corner doing my little thing. And all my guys are kind of inviting me over, but they are kind of started making fun of me. They call me V02 Vaughn, what I mean? Like trying to figure out what was going on. And I told them, I don't know what's going on. All I know is, guys, I feel incredible. I feel nothing hurts all of a sudden, right? And I'm moving really well. Boy, I've added my squat depth back, and I'm locking things overhead in a better position than I have in a long time, because obviously everything wasn't all inflamed and jammed up. So to answer your question, that's what really kind of sold me on it. Was I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to hold on to this capacity that I had built up, and I was afraid of that. And there's a lot of fear there, but all of a sudden I felt amazing. And the other parts of my life, and let's be honest, are the priority, really fell into place quickly.
Amazing. I know you described yourself as being hangry all the time.
Oh my gosh. I just ran on food all the time, right? I was a, carb guy, which isn't the end of the world, but I was just, I craved sugar. I just was nonstop, trying to fuel myself. Because again, I was just overreaching day after day after day.
So let's jump ahead. You did this for a little while, and then you went to see Kate, who I met in Ann Arbor, and Kate tested me as well. And told me some stuff about you, like entertaining stuff, good stuff and entertaining stuff. So you went and got tested, and, you're this great, what we think of as a great athlete at the time in the CrossFit world. And you tested on the metabolic testing, the V02 testing on the bike, same as I did. And how did your results look?
Oh, it was atrocious. Yeah. My first results were terrible. It was, again, I look at a barbell, heart rate through the roof. And not only that, but, I was going to hold on to that, to the bitter end, right? I was going to fight, and I did. But when I got done, I was ruined. Like I was just a mess and just shaky. But like sometimes if you're doing a hard Fran or something else, just, it takes you forever to recover. And that's what it felt like. Yeah. And my results were super poor. And when I say super poor, it means I went right to burning sugar right away. And I had no middle ground. I went from 50 beats a minute for a resting heart rate and up to 150 in a heartbeat, and then just stayed in that 150 to 170 range for forever. Right. So just no aerobic adaptation whatsoever, all anaerobic. And
that's the result of your training, right?
Yeah, that's just how I trained, right? All of us, right? You think about even, you do a 10 or 15 minute workout, right? I would go full dummy and go, super hard out of the gate and just try to hold on for dear life. That's how you got a good score sometimes, is going, just go hard all the time. So that was, it was a complete disaster. And that's when they kind of gave my numbers. And so depending on where your members are staying, because I've been going full dummy for so long, the 180 minus your age that sometimes we used to kind of bracket, it was even worse than that. And so because I was metabolically damaged. And so it took me a long time to earn more points back.
Right. And that's a new concept, right? Is like earning a larger zone to work in. So your original recommendation from Kate was like 125, 135 beats a minute.
Yeah, max, like 120. Right? Yeah, maybe 125 max. Yep.
So you left there and they said 125 beats a minute max. You were 5 weeks out from a competition.
It was.
So how was that drive home, where you were like, man, like, were you thinking about canceling that competition? How did those next couple of days and weeks go for you?
Yeah. So to even complicate matters, this was, my buddies had asked just enough questions that we scheduled a talk at my gym with Max and Kate to come up and tell everybody kind of what was going on and why it was happening and everything else. And you can imagine these guys who are, like I was, exactly I was. So I'm not making fun of them. They're all about competing and everything else and go hard or go home kind of dudes. Listening to this guy say, slow down. And I was in this competition, and so were 3 or 4 of my guys. And some of them were very resistant to what they're hearing. So now all of a sudden we have this battle of philosophies that's going to take place in the same competition. We have slow down V02 Vaughn versus, the guys, and the guys are not necessarily buying what Max said. So going into that competition, you said you thought about pulling out. Yeah, I thought about all the weasel and weasel. I'm like, oh, guys, I heard a thing and I'm out. Like, I was very tempted because I was scared. I'm to slow down that much, to not go, that heavy, to really never get my heart rate up above 130 beats for 5 weeks or so. I think it was before the competition. Yeah, I thought I was going to get buried.
And how did it go?
I crushed everyone. I just missed the podium, but I crushed everyone. And I think these guys would have told you, it's probably the same way with members at your gym. There's certain workouts or programming that comes up and favors your particular strengths. This was not that. This was super sprint heavy and super heavy, and I'm not that big of a dude, and yet I still knocked it out of the park. And not only did I knock it out of the park, but I felt good. I felt like I always pictured myself, and I've always wanted to be that guy. I've never been this guy, but I've always pictured the Rich Froning guy who is just moving calm, right? Is moving extremely well, right? Doesn't look like they're working that hard, but is like mopping the floor with dudes. And it was like that. I had no spittle. I had no whatever, just controlled. And it was really that not only sold it for me, to just know it was still there. That was my big fear. When I do hit the gas, is it still going to be there? And it was all still there. But not only that, but it brought along a lot of naysayers. All of a sudden were in the corner with me, starting to slow down.
Yeah. Okay. So you started to build your own cult.
Yeah, pretty much.
So one of the things so this works, I think, is the bottom line there, right? Like when it comes to competition day, I mentioned to you before we started to record, I work with runners and cyclists. And it's tough when you say to somebody, hey, you're training to run a half marathon, but I don't want you to run fast all the time, right? And there's that anxiety. I felt the anxiety before. I'm like, I'm not running fast enough to do what I want to do. So it's nice to have that first thing under your belt to say, this works for me and I feel good. Those two things are top 2 out of 3 for anybody on their checklist, right?
100%. And what got to be really cool is all of a sudden, my performance is there, and I felt like I'm training in a way that's healthy, that I'm not breaking myself or always wondering if I'm hurt or anything else. So I think it was at this time that CrossFit was at a crossroads, and it might still be, where there's almost these two divides. There was CrossFit for health and fitness and wellness, and that's cool. And then there's, CrossFit, the sport. And it's almost like you had to choose a dividing line, right? And now through this, all of a sudden it's a marriage. You don't have to ruin yourself and break yourself and train in a way where you are literally lying on your back every day and feeling terrible when you wake up in the morning. You can train in a way that you're not damaging yourself. You're able to recover and still have the performance. So it's taken what is considered to be an either or and really merge those two things together for me.
Awesome. That's awesome. I love that story. One of the things I listened to, one of the podcasts I listened to, just to finish up this whole like initial cycle for you, was like you were going through boxes of Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Oh, yes.
Pre heart rate training, like Costco flats of Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Yep.
How long has it been since you had a bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch?
Oh, it's been a little while. It's been a while. I'm still allowed to have it if I want to, but it lives at the store now instead of at my house. So I actually have to go drive somewhere and get it. But yeah, just burning sugar all the time. Car had to have snacks. My wife, to monitor my temperament, had to make sure I had all my sugar and stuff. Now that's balanced out. A lot of those cravings are gone. I'm really much more smooth in that department. So yeah, I'm a little more proud of my shopping cart these days.
That's good. Now, for those in our audience, I've been talking a lot about my experience getting tested. So everybody kind of knows you put on I think they call it the Darth Vader mask, and
sure,
progressively go faster on the console or the assault bike. which is terrible sounding to a lot of people. What that testing does is it really tells us two things, right? It tells us how well we metabolize fat, both at exercise and during rest, and how well we metabolize carb. And in your initial test, you were, you admitted this, you're brutal at metabolizing fat. You metabolize it at very low intensities. And then as soon as, your heart rate got through the warm up, you were all carb all the time. How long was it between first and second test of doing this new style of training? Like, how long was that first, second test window?
About 8 weeks apart.
8 weeks. And, I'll link to the one podcast I'm talking about from 2018 for our members, but you were a different person when you came back in the second time, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
You earned more heart rate. So you left there. I think, I'm not sure where I put it in my notes, but you left there, and their recommendation at that point was like, you've earned the right to work in the 140s, 150s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you felt better when the test was over. You recovered right away.
Yeah.
A lot of things changed in that short period of time. And, all you did in that short period of time was slow down and keep your heart rate below that number, right? You did a lot of, if we're putting it in a category or a color, like you guys do at Justice, and we're going to start doing here, it was zone 2 green at max, right? Maybe touching yellow a little bit once in a while.
Yep. All green, yellow, almost always. And the cool thing about that you mentioned when you talk about that first test and how I used to work out is, again, I was 50 beats a minute or 150 beats a minute, and it would take hardly any work to get me to jump. As I went through this process, not only did my crossover change of when I started burning carb and versus fat, but I was able to do so much more work before I hit that point.
Right.
So that's the thing when you are working with your members, that's so neat, is even if your crossover doesn't change necessarily all of that much, the amount of work you're able to do and still be below, let's say 140 beats, is tremendous. I have many workouts I do where that's my goal, is not to go over 145, let's say, and I'm moving just about as fast as I want to, as far as like, if you just said, go at it, I'm not moving that much slower than I would if I was actually trying to go after it pretty good, just because I've gotten my body so good at doing a lot of work, staying calm, right? I've taught it to stay calm and do a whole lot of work without flipping over and going full dummy. So it's, that's a kind of the neat second part about it, is that as you're improving metabolically, you're also improving how much work it takes to push you, too deep.
Yeah, very cool. I'm excited to see what happens after this first 6 weeks with our people.
Awesome.
So we're a week in, and we're, like I said, we're trying to follow level method a little bit. I'm adapting it to make it fit, so adjusting some of the reps to time parameters and things like that. I let them have 2 orange-red days today, just because it was in the programming already. They did a complete green on Monday. They did another green today. And the learning curve is very evident from Monday to today in terms of how well the group was able to stay closer to that green, right? What are your tips for someone who's learning how to do this? Where they see, you can see this happen. And I know the first workout I did with Chris and Rose and Sarah, we did a coach's workout when I came down on the Sunday, and I did the same thing. I was like a deer in headlights. As soon as it went yellow, I was like, I got to stop now. I got to wait for this to come back down. Oh yeah, I got to breathe. What's your tip for having someone ideally keep moving in green? Obviously we're, I'm saying to them, you got to figure out how each movement affects you and how you can manage that. What's your overall arching advice for staying in green? Is there something you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, if let's imagine being able to go do a set of 20 wall balls at 20 pounds and stay green, right? That'd be our eventual goal. That'd be pretty awesome, right?
Yeah.
I mean, imagine doing 20 wall balls and getting done and going, I'm just kind of moving on, right? That's great. Well, how are you going to start that, right? You're going to start that by probably going a little lighter. Let's not grab a 20-pound wall ball, right? And you're not going to lose strength. Wall ball is not meant to be a strength movement. So yeah, maybe you're doing a 12-pound wall ball right now, right? To stay green. Or maybe we're doing thrusters with an empty barbell, or maybe you're doing 65 pounds. Now, members, I hear you shaking your head. I can, all the way here in Michigan, I heard the size. You're like, come on. I know it's incredibly humbling, but we're talking about what if we did this over a period of time, right? And so maybe we're doing some 12-pound wall balls, that maybe it is a set of 20, but we're going to break them up 12 and 8 and have to, rest 10 or 15 seconds in between that 12 and the 8. But then imagine doing this, 4 or 5 weeks from now. Now we're doing the same thing with a 14-pound ball, and then give yourself a couple more weeks and doing a 16-pound. You're going to get there eventually, but the hardest part is holding back early and being patient enough. And just like that suntan analogy, it doesn't do you any good to overreach and get burned, because now you're kind of, you're starting over, what I mean? And we don't, and so it's so hard to understand that process. And it took me, King Dummy, a long time to figure that out, that when I say I'm going to go slower, I have to really believe that there's good things on the other side. So if you use just that simple analogy of, hey, I want to be able to do X or Y or Z, like the 20 wall ball example, I really have to give my body time to adapt to that. So let's try not to grab it all at once. Imagine this is going to be a little bit of a process. And the more patient you are now, the better it's going to be later. And this is the number one, when we have newer members come in, this is our number one conversation that we probably have to have. And it's so hard. And it's good that it's okay to hit a 4 or 5 day every once in a while. Like you just shared, Mike, especially if you have a rest day following, that's okay every once in a while to touch that. That's great. That's super. But, we're going to let ourselves heal from that before we're to introduce any other kind of training. When we do, we're going to make sure it's kind of green day again.
Right. So the overarching message, I think, is like you mentioned wall ball. If I want to do the 20-pound wall ball, I have to learn how to squat aerobically first, right? And that might be step one. So
even better.
And that's I think what we're trying to learn, right? Is that if you want to do these movements faster, or if you want to do them at a higher intensity with less energy use, you have to learn how to do them aerobically first, right?
Yep.
And that's that zone 2. At our lunch group today, I said, what did we have in our group today? We had like sort of a row. We had a bunch of stuff that was going to be hard to keep in, some pull-ups and some kettlebell swings. And I said, go with the lightest kettlebell you can find on the shelf. Maybe you can't do ring rows today in zone 2. So you're going to grab light dumbbells and you're going to do bent over rows. We're still going to pull in. I said, lower your expectations to the floor, dig a hole in the floor, and then lower those expectations further. And that's where we wanted to be today. And you know what? Everyone sent me their data from self loops. We had 10, 12 people in the lunchtime group today, and people nailed it today that hadn't been nailing it on Monday. So the learning curve is pretty steep. I had a question from our coach, Jess, who's our nutrition coach. She did the same 2-brain nutrition course that
great.
You've got. Jess was wondering how and if you see a difference in your gym when you see, set zones for women, or you see how women adapt to this type of training, or do you see it as fairly universal across men and women, especially initially?
Yeah, no, it's pretty darn universal for what I've seen. You know what I mean? I think it's more the big struggle is the personality. It reminds me of the marshmallow test in American kindergarten schools. Have you heard of the marshmallow test?
No, I don't think
this is a great test. It's called the marshmallow test. And they would take a marshmallow and put it in front of your kindergartner and say, okay, we're going to leave the room and don't touch your marshmallow. And if we come back in 5 minutes, that marshmallow is still there, we're going to give you 2 more. Mm-hmm. And the person leaves the room, and those kids stare at that marshmallow, and they keep staring at it, and they start to touch it and whatever. And then eventually they eat it. Well, not all eat it, but it's the whole idea of delayed gratification to see, if kids can actually resist the temptation. And for us, it's almost, you see that personality, those that can actually resist the temptation and trust the process. There's going to be 2 marshmallows there for you later if you can slow down a little bit. But that's the test within the test. And our members that tend to kind of trust that process, and it takes a lot of trust. And if I can say anything to your membership, your Mike has your very best intentions in mind, and I'm telling you, there's some marshmallows out there for you if you can just slow down and trust the process. I am living proof of that. I've never felt better than I have, and I'm competing at a higher level. I made the quarterfinals as a master's athlete. I'm 49, so technically I'm at my highest age for my category, and was still able to make the quarterfinals. Not because I'm a special snowflake. I'm not a freak athlete. I'm not a a special guy. It's just I've trusted this process for a long time, and I've had really consistently, slowly building progress this whole time, which has been just terribly exciting.
Awesome. That was an unpaid endorsement of so I'll send you the check.
Yeah, my Venmo. I'll send you my Venmo in a minute.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just going to go through my notes here. One of the things that I pulled out of your last podcast was two things. You literally used the hashtag now. Your Instagram is Vaughn Coffee and Bacon, correct?
Yeah, Vaughn Coffee and Bacon. Yep.
You literally use the hashtag Better Human Being to describe how this training method has affected you. Do you still believe that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I'm training less, and my results are better. Yeah. And I'm calm, and I don't leave the gym ruined, and I have way more energy throughout my day. And I'm so lucky I get to play roles as a coach, as a father, as a brother, as a son. I'm a teacher. I'm one of those weird people that loves middle schoolers. And boy, all of those relationships have blossomed because I'm able to give so much more of myself to all of these people, because I actually can pour from a pretty full cup still. That's awesome. So yeah, it's made a big change, and I'm so glad that I've gone through this process, because there was going to be a time when I was going to have to make a choice of, do I continue going down this road? And I didn't want to, I think many of your members are probably the same way. I don't want to half-ass anything, right? I want to go, if I'm going to jump into CrossFit, I want to do this, to the best of my ability. And I thought that meant more, which brought less energy or less time for everything else. Now I'm realizing that, this is when you look at Olympic athletes, they don't train like we did back in the full dummy CrossFit days. They're not laying on their back every single day. Why are we the only ones that look like this? If you watch them train racehorses, they don't train racehorses this way. You know what I mean? Yet we as humans think they're CrossFitters, man. They think we need to train this way. Yeah. So now that we've found a better way, now I feel like there's not an either or, and I can give so much more of myself to everyone else and pour myself into this hobby and this lifestyle that I love so much.
Amazing. You wear a lot of hats. You wear them well. It sounds like you figured out that great balance. So I consider you also a mentor and a friend. So thanks for joining me today.
You bet, Mike.
Hope we cross paths again here soon, and you're always welcome up at Catalyst.
I'm going to take you up on that. Absolutely. Yeah. I'd love to come up and train with your membership and everything else.
Amazing.
Yeah. If anyone needs anything, Mike gave my Instagram. Feel free to reach out. I'm glad to answer questions. I know there's some trepidation to slowing down and wondering how long it's going to take. And everybody's a little bit different. But if you really honor it and you really slow down and take your time, you're going to feel better, and all of that performance will be there.
Thanks a lot, Vaughn. You're the man. Talk to you soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks.
All right. Have a great night.
You too. Thanks, buddy.
Okay, bye now.